Listen, kid, I've been hearing that crap ever since I was at TAS. I'm out there busting my buns every week. Tell your old man to drag zombie takeout up and down for 48 minutes.
Hello and welcome to episode 536 of Zombie Takeout, the B-Movie and Cult Movie Show. I'm John.
Hello, I'm Scotto.
And before we get to this week's movie, just want to mention that since the year is rapidly coming to a close, next year we will be switching to an every other week schedule. We had to do that for scheduling reasons a couple months this year, and it just kind of made better sense to me.
It feels better, and I feel like we're
I won't have to be editing in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So
yeah, let's not do that.
Since we do 2 shows every time we record, there will still be an episode every week. It'll alternate a Zombie Takeout or occasionally the TV show one week, the hearing the next week. So the schedule from a listener standpoint won't change that much. It'll just be a lot easier on us. And without any further ado, on to this week's movie, which is from 1980, Airplane. Of course, this is our Jim Abrams tribute. He passed away a few days ago.
Yeah, this, it was kind of like he's done so much, for this Police Squad that just shapes our sense of humor, really.
I was watching at the beginning of this thinking, like, between this and, like, WKRP, which I referenced on Thanksgiving, of course, like, you can see, and then, of course, Night Court, you can see, like, 90% of our common humor.
Yeah, pretty much. Yep, that's the skeleton key to Finnegan's Wake there for our sense of humor.
And of course, that brings us to the impromptu plot summary, sponsored by Modern Sperm Magazine. Sold at better airports everywhere.
And also brought to you by Sight Gags. They don't really work in an audio setting like this, though, do they? Okay. All right, so for a movie that's as zany as this and is largely an excuse to show sight gags for a good hour and a half, there's actually a fucking plot.
Oh, yeah.
That's the shocking thing about this.
That was completely borrowed. I'll get to that in trivia later.
Well, yeah, but there's still a plot.
Yeah.
So you have this man who and woman who their relationship is on the end pretty much because he's a veteran from a war that things didn't go so well, and he's really just can't adopt a normal life.
Developed a drinking problem.
Yes, he has a drinking problem, and he's just so desperate to keep this relationship going that he does something that he's shied away from, and that is getting on a plane, even though they were in the Peace Corps, and I'm assuming they took planes to get to that.
Yeah.
But that was a different thing, I guess.
Yeah.
So he books a seat on the flight that she's a stewardess on, and just to get more time with her and try to work things out by the time they land. But of course, things go sideways when there's poisonous food being served to pretty much half the plane, I guess. Yeah. The problem is it's the entire flight crew. And I don't know if they did it because of this movie or if they just did it in intervals of precaution. They normally don't have the same thing to eat, the crew.
Right.
Especially if it's a long flight. This is, of course, just, L.A. to Chicago or something like something west.
But they were going to Chicago. I don't remember where they started.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't know if they actually mentioned. I'm assuming it's L.A. though, because they're, Hollywood types, and that's what they would do. And so yes, the whole crew is down, and they need somebody to to land the plane. And of course, our hero is the only person that has any flight experience on the plane, and he has to get talked down by his former CO from the days of the war where things didn't go well in the first place, and it was kind of left on him. And the person that just happens to be a doctor on the plane gives him a pep talk when he's down to get back into it. And
Once again, borrowed.
yeah, well, yeah, they're very obvious where they got that pep
Yeah.
talk from. It went right over my head as a kid. But
I had to Google it to be sure this time.
oh yeah, he so of course he has to go land the plane himself in the fog and rain and everything, and hilarity ensues.
Airplane was inspired by the 1957 film Zero Hour. While they were performing with the Kentucky Fried Theater, a theater group that they had founded in '71 and that inspired, of course, Kentucky Fried Movie, Zucker, Abrams, and Zucker would routinely record the late-night TV to get sketch inspiration from the commercials. One night, they accidentally taped Zero Hour. Jerry Zucker said that it's a perfectly classically structured film, and Jim Abrams has described it as the serious version of Airplane.
I thought there was like Airport 77 was a movie like right before this too. That was of course a serious version of it.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they had the parody movie lined up just 3 years after this, attempt at a serious movie had come out.
It sounds like they had already been working on it, already had it, at least written, and or had the sketch of an idea, and then Airport 77 happened, and it was like, okay, we got to do this. Love that Jaws opening.
Yeah.
They totally parody Jaws with the fin of the airplane in the clouds. I noticed David Leisure is one of the Hare Krishnas.
Yes.
There are a couple of subtle, I won't call them cameos because these people weren't necessarily huge when this movie was made, but it's interesting going back.
They're very early days for some of them.
Yeah. Particularly David Leisure. This was before Joe Azuzu, which is what made him famous.
Way before. Did you catch the Jonathan Banks?
Jonathan Banks I caught. I also caught James Hong.
Oh, wow.
The Japanese soldier.
Oh, okay.
The plane going through the window was a hell of a stunt for the start of the movie.
I wonder how much they blew in budget for that.
Yeah, this was 80. You couldn't CGI that shit.
Right. I mean, maybe it was a model,
It had to be a model in front of like a green screen, but still, that's impressive. But the pacing of the jokes is just stunning, and I mean that in a literal sense. It stuns you.
Right. And there is not an inch of real estate on this movie where they don't put a gag into it, or a joke, or something in there.
You think we're fast? We learned it from them.
Yeah. Only we knew, we couldn't possibly be that fast.
I mean, we get some good speed going, but we're nothing compared to Zaz.
Right, of course.
I mean, the jokes go by even faster than I remember. I love the smoking section gag. When Ted, the pilot, buys the military pilot, buys a ticket, they ask him smoking or non-smoking. The idea of smoking on a plane now, and I say this as an ex-smoker, is kind of mind-blowing. But she sells him the smoking ticket, and it's literally smoking.
I think they still have, the no smoking lights and stuff.
Probably.
There's a point you could or couldn't smoke. I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me that that's a place you'd smoke, but who knows?
I love the old woman who's sitting next to Ted as he's going on about the story, and she's commenting on Elaine's body.
Probably my favorite gag, one of all-time favorite gags, is him telling his life story, to unwilling or people who, but were politely asking him a question,
right?
And then to have him, just bore them to death, literally.
That gag goes from to really fucking problematic fast, though.
That is why it's my all-time favorite.
Because it starts with an old woman who hangs herself. Okay, fine.
Yes. Well, even that's kind of shriveling. When it comes to, you just see the dangling feet.
I mean, as someone who with depression, it's a little iffy, but okay. And then a Japanese soldier who commits seppuku,
Yes.
played by a Chinese guy, but a Chinese American
Yeah.
guy, but neither here nor there. He's Asian at least. And then a guy in a turban who tries to immolate himself with a can of gas, who is clearly a white guy in brown face.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's when I had to be like, okay, no. I was willing to give them a pass on the seppuku because at least a Japanese soldier, okay, but the brown face and the turban, because I think they were playing off of like the Islamic terrorist thing, but turbans are Sikh.
Yeah. That for then, I don't even know if that was much of a thing though, Islamic terrorists. I mean, I guess you had the revolution in
Yeah,
Iran.
there were in the early '80s, late '70s, early '80s. It was a thing. It got more severe later, but it was starting around that point.
I think it was so vague that they weren't even really sure what they were parodying there, you
Right?
know? I
Yeah.
mean, immolation, you think of the
Well, yeah.
Buddhists.
And if it was a Buddhist monk, and I say this as someone who's basically a secular Buddhist, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, it would have made more sense.
Right. Then we get the flashback in the bar. That whole scene is so damn dated.
It is it's kind of it's peak absurdity, the whole
Yeah.
sequence.
Right.
The Girl Scout fight.
Right. I never understood why they speed up staying alive.
I I didn't know it was actually the Bee Gees because just was so fast and so
It's the
high.
original recording, which presumably they got the rights for, but they speed it up, and I don't get that. I do like the wire gag that goes from him doing like the Russian dancing to juggling.
Yeah.
And then the next thing that was, well, actually, the first thing, in chronologically speaking, that was like, ooh, that does not age well. Clarence Over, one of the pilots, the pilot, they bring a young boy into the cockpit to kind of see the cockpit, gives him a model airplane instead of the pin. And then Clarence asks him if he's ever seen a gladiator. No, the first one was the worst. If he's ever seen a grown man naked.
Yeah.
Um,
And I want to say that the attitude of that in the 70s was a lot different from now, but
well,
they
even in the '90s, how often did we quote that scene back in college?
they clearly knew what they were doing. You
Oh
know,
yeah,
they were looking to cross the line.
right, right.
And it's funny that it's even a line now
Yeah,
that's like, holy shit,
hmm,
he really went there.
yeah,
And I've heard that Graves had a lot of problems doing that too.
hmm.
Like
I
he
would
wasn't
hope
really
so.
happy with that.
Yeah,
And it was kind of like they really needed to talk him into
uh,
to doing those lines. It was like, look, the joke is you obviously wouldn't be,
hmm,
wouldn't be saying those things. That's the joke.
right. I did like how they broke the fourth wall with Kareem.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the co-pilot, plays the co-pilot, and in the scene when the kid is in the cockpit, he recognizes him, even though he's playing this other character, Roger
Right.
Under. Is it Under, or am I going to the second movie again?
Ah,
No, no, Roger Murdoch. Under's
Murdoch.
in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
next movie. Yeah, but Roger Murdoch, the co-pilot, the kid recognizes as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and he's like, "No, I'm not him." And then the kid tells him this criticism his father had of him playing, and he starts defending himself, and clearly he is Kareem. Later, when he gets sick and has to be carried out of the cockpit, he's wearing the basketball shorts.
Yeah, his Laker uniform, pretty much.
Mhm.
Uh, they tried to have said that that wasn't like scripted, but come on. I
Mhm.
mean, Kareem. I I realized when we did the intro that I was putting more into it than Kareem
Yeah, yeah.
did. I, which very rarely happens with our intros. But I'm like, wait a minute, I acted that better than Kareem did.
Then we get the flashback to the hospital after the war. Why was pop culture so fascinated with Ethel Merman back in the late '70s and early '80s?
I didn't realize she was still alive at this point.
Mm.
I mean, 1980?
She like did a lot of game shows and shit back then, and like
She was
variety
kind
shows
of
and.
a she was kind of a punchline then,
Hmm.
because just this, loud,
Yeah,
shrill woman.
it just seemed odd. Like looking back in this era, there was a lot of stuff that was like from decades earlier that was a punchline at the time, and our generation knew nothing about.
I mean, think
For
about it. Bad,
older
bad,
people, it
bad
probably
world.
made sense.
Bad, Bad, Bad World was a good, 12 years before, before
Mm.
this.
Right,
And it was almost the same character, but the fact that, it's just herself
right.
singing.
Yeah, it's kind of what she always did.
I think there, though, the real joke is you expect to see a dude imitating Ethel Merman
Right.
instead of Ethel Merman
The actual
herself.
Ethel Merman, right?
Which, of course, that was a surprise to me because I was like, wait a minute, she was still alive in 1980? What the fuck?
I liked the way Victor smiled at the camera in one scene. Murdoch and Over smile at each other, and then Victor just looks
Yes.
dead into the camera with this garish smile. I got a kick out of that.
Was that before the song?
Yeah. Oh, it was during the song. Yeah.
It was during the song.
Yeah. One
That's
of the
right.
flight attendants. There's a girl on the plane who was on the way to a heart transplant in a gurney, and one of the nurses or one of the flight attendants is playing a
Attendance.
song for her, and everybody kind of sings along with it and kind of sways to the song, including the pilots.
Everyone's so happy and
Yeah,
everything. Of course, the gag is she's knocking her IV out,
yeah.
uh, and that was kind of a thing. They they really swung for the fences on this movie. Like everything is packed.
Hmm.
There's so many things that they put in. Like that whole song was just like shoehorned in.
Yeah.
But even when they were shoehorning in that, they still shoehorned in jokes on top of that
Hmm.
too. Like when they do the flashbacks, I mean, they put a here to from here to eternity,
Yeah. Right.
parody in there. They really made this movie like they might never get a chance to make a movie
Yeah. Yeah.
again. They really just went for it all.
And I think they had already done Kentucky Fried. Yeah, they wrote Kentucky Fried.
Yes,
They didn't direct. This was their first time directing, if I recall
but
correctly.
but this was kind of like a mainstream,
Right.
this was a major studio thing where
Hmm.
Kentucky Fried
It was
definitely
a
felt
little
like,
indie thing, right?
yeah, this was they had some money. They could
Hmm.
get Ethel Merman.
Right.
They could get
Peter
the music
Graves.
from Gypsy. And yeah, Peter Graves, Robert Stack.
Hmm.
Uh, every place, by the way, they're talking about in the war is, of course, related to a drink. They were
Uh-huh.
in Drambuie,
Right. I caught
and
that.
they were going to Daiquiri.
Uh-huh.
They were going to bomb Daiquiri the
Right.
next day.
When they were in the Peace Corps and they went to visit the African tribe, that got a little iffy because the African tribe were inherently good at basketball.
Right? They just pick it up, and of course they're just killing him. He's like, oh, they're getting into this. They're picking it up.
Mm. And they're like the Harlem Globetrotters, practically.
Yes, they just start spinning the ball like right away. There, there's a lot of jokes like that
Mm.
in this, of course.
And yeah, it's a different time and a lot of comedy ages like milk, but yeah, I just feel the need to point it out. I did love the drinking problem bit. That is classic. It's not that he's an alcoholic, it's that whenever he tries to take a drink, he misses his
He
mouth.
hits the side of his head with the glass instead. It's his delivery of it too.
Mhm. Yeah.
That would be a pretty bad joke. Oh, if he just missed it. But the gusto he has with it of slamming the glass into the side of
Right.
his head, spilling it all over himself, is what really sells it.
And that was kind of the genius of Zaz with this movie. They picked people who weren't really known for this kind of comedy, or in a couple of cases, comedy at all,
Right.
and let them run with it. Robert Hayes, who played Ted, did like sitcoms and shit, but it wasn't this kind of broad comedy. It was
I'm
more
not
of
even
kind of a
sure.
laid back leading man kind of thing. Um, Peter Graves, Leslie Nielsen were not known for comedy. There
Very
was a
serious.
time when Leslie Nielsen was a serious dramatic actor.
Oh yeah.
Before this movie, he was not known for comedy, and this made him a comedy icon.
I mean, I thought Hayes was kind of an unknown before this, really. I mean,
Maybe I'm thinking slightly after this, but I know he did a couple of sitcoms, maybe around this time.
I don't know if there were anything that lasted though, because I mean, it was.
I don't remember what lasted. I have vague memories of, like, I think it was Angie was the name of the show that he was on around this
Yeah,
time.
I'm mostly seeing stuff where he would do an episode, or
Okay.
like
Yeah.
guest appearances
Right.
kind of thing.
Speaking of Graves, loved him acting out the symptoms of the illness. As Nielsen and one of the stewardesses are talking about the various symptoms, you see him acting him out like he's finally coming down with the illness. The inflatable pilot gag, automatic pilot gag, was good until she had to reinflate him. Some of the humor is just 12 years old, and I'm just not into it anymore.
I was just imagining how shocking that had to have been for a 1980
Yeah, fair,
audience,
fair.
though. I mean, I don't. I mean, I think it was something used more throughout the 80s.
Hmm.
Like the Police Academy and the. I'm trying to think of it. The podium gag, where they weren't even as graphic as that, like simulating it
Right.
like that. To do that in a mainstream movie, and even like some of the drug jokes, where I've kind of always rolled my eyes when they have a movie does drug humor.
Hmm.
This they actually have
Yeah,
this old lady
snorting a lot of
snorting
coke.
up.
I mean, it probably wasn't actual coke, but yeah, on camera she snorts up a line of something.
Of course, the joke is in the way they frame it. Of course, where she's offered a shot of whiskey or
Right.
something because they're about to crash,
Hmm.
um, and she, morally offended, and
Hmm.
turns to her mirror to
Hmm.
drop
That's
a
a line.
line with the little bell ringing too. Again, I can imagine that had to have been pretty damn shocking for
Huh.
1980.
Yeah.
Because Scarface
Yeah.
was like after this.
Or same year, maybe a year later. It was like 80, 81.
Yeah.
And yeah, but it's a very different movie. So, and that was, yeah, pretty shocking. That was almost exit, but
Scarface was 83.
was it? Okay, 2 years after.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was kind of like, whoa, they're really doing cocaine here.
Right. And then, of course, we get to the control tower with Lloyd Bridges and Robert. Is it Robert Stack? Yeah, I always
Yes.
confuse him with Vaughn. Loved the mirror gag with Rex, Stack's character. You think he's fixing him, putting on his coat and kind of, adjusting himself in a mirror. He walks straight through the mirror. Just a nice gag. Johnny is an icon.
Yeah.
The great Steven Stuck. Very, very gay character in the control tower. Just causing absolute chaos.
And just quotes that have lasted
Uh-huh.
44 years
Right.
after this. Uh, if it wasn't for him though, it would pretty much be a straight up bad drama. The
Right.
whole
Yeah.
tower, all that whole sequence.
Uh-huh.
They are just playing, with the exception of the amazing Lloyd Bridges,
Yeah.
who man went for it.
Pick the wrong week to stop smoking. Pick the wrong week to stop drinking. Pick the wrong week to stop doing amphetamines. Pick the wrong week to stop sniffing glue. I quoted the last one in my post about Jim Abrams passing.
It's again, normally roll my eyes at drug humor,
Uh-huh.
but his
Yeah.
his sniffing glue thing has to be one of the best drug jokes
Yeah.
of all time. Just the hanging upside down, the
And it's all in how he
jumping out the
plays it.
window. Yes.
On the page, it's not that interesting, but he plays it
No.
beautifully.
And the fact that it's Lloyd Bridges,
Right.
a very serious actor.
Now, at the beginning of the film, there's a taxi that pulls up very aggressively onto the curb, and a guy gets in, to flag it down. Ted gets out, runs into the airport, and says, "I'll be right back." Starts the meter. With like a half hour left in the movie, they check back with him. He's still sitting in the taxi. I'm
It
glad they checked back with him.
Well, I mean, just wouldn't work if they didn't. And I mean, of course, it's the absurdity because somebody would have left, 5 minutes because he ran the meter too.
Right.
He starts the meter and then leaves the cab. I mean, most people would just be like, "Fuck you,
Yeah.
I'm out."
Right.
He sits there, and of course, he's there after the credits.
Uh-huh.
The credits, he says, "I'm waiting 20 more minutes, but that's it."
I actually didn't see that this time. I stepped away early because I was running away. As soon as they went to the actual credits, I stopped watching because I was, kind of pressed for time. I totally missed that part this time.
And I'm trying to think of post-credit scenes. You always had the Cannonball Run blooper reel during the credits.
Right.
But how many movies had scenes after the credits before
Yeah.
this?
How many movies did before the MCU? It was pretty rare then.
Yeah.
Love June Cleaver speaking jive.
Now, if that's one thing, I mean, the jive joke is like the one if there was a joke I picked that
Was it
doesn't
uncomfortable?
quite last or doesn't live up, it would be that one. But that's kind of a part of it too. Like it's a different language and
Right.
just, and then of course to have June Cleaver be the
Right.
person that speaks.
Over's wife sleeping with a horse, I just didn't get.
Was that the only reason why they called her? Was it an excuse to show a
I
horse
think so.
in the bed?
Yeah.
Because why would you call the pilot's wife
Yeah, to
to
let
come
her
down
know
to the
that the
airport?
plane is going down. Yeah.
I mean, the connotations usually at that point I would think would be referencing The Godfather, but that was a different reason to have a
No.
horse in the bed.
That was in a horse's head, which is be the Godfather's
Yes.
gag. Which also wouldn't make much sense. No, this was well, let's just call a spade a spade. It was a bestiality joke.
Yeah.
Which, wow.
Yes. There's no box unchecked here.
Yeah. I did get a kick out of the ice cream cone for a microphone when Johnny's talking to the press. It was subtle, but it was nice.
I don't think I caught it even. That's the thing with this. You could watch this many times and there'd be like something new.
The newscaster gag, very reminiscent of Kentucky Fried. They basically just quoted themselves there.
They went back to point counterpoint.
Yeah,
I think it's the same dude.
probably. Win one for the zipper was just a groan.
Like I said,
They directly quoted the Newt Rockney speech.
that joke totally went over my head as a kid, and I just forgot its existence until watching it this time. I'm
Right.
like, oh wow.
I liked the sparks coming off of the plane when it was landing, quote unquote. That was a nice effect. Probably a mini. On to sequels and remakes.
Yeah, on to sequels and remakes.
Of course, this was followed by Airplane 2, the sequel in 1982. Last time I saw it, I was pretty underwhelmed.
It doesn't. I don't think it lived up to this, but I think it was still. I'd still take it over the Not Another movies that
of course.
came in their wake.
Yeah. And both of us thought the Macho Grande joke was in this movie. Turns out it wasn't. Apparently, it's in the second one.
Which means it can't be all that bad. And I loved Sonny Bono's turn as the terrorist.
Yeah.
I'll take the bomb on the left, please.
Underbrains.
On a brains.
A lot of it didn't age well, but I had to give it an extra half a brain for Johnny. I'm going 4.5.
And man, it's a classic. I identified too much with Robert Hayes during the landing scene as a dude who sweats too much. But I got to go 5. This is just a classic. It's kind of the blueprint for movies that came 40 and more years to come.
Yeah, yeah.
Zaz is just a legacy on its own, and they created their own genre.
And what have we learned?
We learned to give me a ham on 5 and hold the mayo.
And I learned not to have the fish.
Don't eat the fish.
And that's it for Airplane until next time when we'll be ending the year a week earlier than planned because senioritis is a thing. We'll be doing our best of the year. We actually don't have worst lists this year, which is interesting. At least I don't. Do you think you will?
Oh, I don't know. I've got to really look at the numbers and stuff and sort it out. I'll see what I've got.
But I mean, I've got a few dishonorable mentions, but the rest are all good. And we'll be reviewing Doctor Who, and yes, I mean the '96 TV movie with Eric Roberts and Paul McCann. That'll be interesting. Until then, of course, always remember, never forget, wherever you go in life,
there you are.